Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. News came down late last week that the teenager who walked into his high school in Oxford, Michigan on November 30th of 2021 and murdered 4 of his classmates will spend the rest of his life in prison after he was sentenced on Friday. The Daily Wire reports that the Oxford high school shooter, who we will not name per our podcast policy, asked Oakland County Circuit Court Judge Kwame Rowe Friday that he imposed any sentence that the family of the victims asked for. All 29 of the people who gave victim statements before the sentencing, including the grieving family members, students, and a teacher who was injured in the mass shooting, told the judge they wanted the shooter to be sentenced to life without parole, and the judge agreed, according to the Detroit News report. Quote, "The court cannot ignore the deep trauma the defendant caused to the state of Michigan, but partially the Oxford community," Rowe said. "The terror that he caused in the state of Michigan and in Oxford is a true act of terrorism," unquote. The 4 Oxford high school students were killed when the shooter opened fire in the halls of his school 2 years ago. Madison Baldwin, who was 17, Hannah St. Juliana, who was 14, Tate Meyer, who was 16, and Justin Schilling, who was 17, all died in the shooting, while 6 other students and a teacher were injured. In October of 2022, the shooter pleaded guilty to 24 charges, which included 1 count of terrorism causing death and 4 counts of first-degree murder. During the victim statement, the father of the 16-year-old victim, Tate Meyer, addressed the shooter directly. He said this, he said, quote, "I understand from journal entries this was the desired outcome, for us to feel the pain that you had." This is what Buck Meyer said. "I will tell you this, we are miserable. We miss Tate. Our family has a permanent hole in it that can never be fixed ever," unquote. Well, Judge Brown said that mental illness, even if the shooter had a history of it, did not play a part in the mass killer's attack. Brown noted that the shooter was obsessed with violence, planned the attacks for weeks, and wanted to stay alive after committing the atrocities so he could see people suffer. Quote, "He could have changed his mind after shooting his first victim," Rowe said, while handing down the sentence, according to the Detroit Free Press. But he didn't. He continued to walk through the school, picking and choosing who was going to die. As the defendant said in his own words, "This is nobody's fault but his own." This is what the judge said. Now, so you see, this was a premeditated and planned out act of violence. He picked this school for a reason. But this was not the only tragedy of this kind. I mean, just this week, it happened again. The shooter who murdered 3 people and injured a 4th person at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas on Wednesday was identified as a professor who recently applied for a job at the school, according to police sources. Around 11:45 a.m., the shooter made his way to the 4th floor of Beam Hall at UNLV's business school, where he opened fire. The gunman then went to multiple floors before he was taken down by officers when he was outside the building. It's according to Las Vegas Police Sheriff Kevin McCannell. The gunman, a 67-year-old man who had previously worked as an associate professor for 15 years at East Carolina University, had applied for a job at UNLV but didn't get it. police sources said, according to an ABC News report. Authorities said the shooter was killed in a shootout with two police detectives who responded to the shooting. Quote, "If it hadn't been for the heroic actions of one of those police officers who responded, there could have been countless additional lives taken," McKenna Hill said. And he added that armed confrontation of the suspect by law enforcement stopped the suspect's further actions. In an op-ed response to this, Amanda Collins Johnson of crimeresearch.org and an author of the book Beyond Survival, Reclaiming My Life After I Survived Rape, said this. It said, "As I heard the news about a mass shooting at the University of Nevada at Las Vegas, UNLV, I immediately recalled an event 16 years ago during my junior year at the University of Nevada, Reno. I was raped in the parking garage only feet away from the campus police officer. As this stranger raped me, I could see the police cruiser parked for the night, and I knew no one was coming for me. The man who raped me at gunpoint did so in a gun-free zone. My rapist, just like Wednesday's mass shooter at the University of Nevada, took advantage of the gun-free zone, ensuring that his victims would be defenseless. How does rendering me, a law-abiding citizen, defenseless protect anyone against a violent crime?" Eventually, the man who raped me was caught, but not before he also raped two other women and murdered one of them. At the time of my attack, I had obtained a CCW permit for the personal choice of not wanting to be a defenseless target. The University of Nevada still bans permit holders from carrying firearms on campus. As a law-abiding citizen, I left my firearm at home. Consequently, the very law meant to ensure my safety only guaranteed the criminal of unmatched victim. The question plaguing me is, what would have been different if I had been carrying my weapon that night? I know I had been carrying my firearm that night, I would have been able to stop my attack as it was in progress. Consequently, the rapist would have never raped two other women. The survivor of rape can understand, any survivor of rape can understand that the young woman I was walking in, the young woman I was walking into the parking garage that night was not the same woman who left. My life has never been the same after my attack. Legalized concealed campus carry would have saved my family, who happens to be the collateral damage of my story, and me a great deal of untold torment. My case is a perfect example. Despite law enforcement's best efforts to ensure our safety, they cannot be everywhere simultaneously. All I wanted was a chance to defend myself effectively. The choice to participate in one's defense should have been left to the individual. The government should not make that choice. As a law-abiding citizen, I should not have had to hand over my safety to a third party. The legislators across this country continue to effectively legislate women like me into being victims by stripping away our Second Amendment rights. Lawmakers opposed to campus carry are more intimidated by law-abiding citizens like me sitting in class with their permitted weapons than of rapists waiting for me in a parking garage. Most people are unaware that 1 in 4 women will be raped while attending college, and a third of them occur on their college campus. 11 states permit campus carry, and not one of those states has seen a rise in crimes committed with firearms. There has been a decrease in crimes committed on campus property. Still, law-abiding citizens are barred from exercising this fundamental freedom on our publicly funded university campuses, leaving them defenseless against gun-wielding criminals who disregard the laws. The laws need to change so that those with a concealed carry permit can lawfully bring firearms onto college campuses, just as they do anywhere else in their daily lives. In my experience, personal safety threats don't magically disappear in declared safe zones, especially on campuses. Today, a news breaks about an active shooter at UNLV, and my heart sinks, and I'm enraged at the very same time. Evil persists, and leaving law-abiding citizens still prevails in my home state. For over a decade, state legislatures in Nevada have had the opportunity to change this travesty of safety. Yet my pleas, along with many others, fell on deaf ears. Lawmakers chose to remain willfully ignorant of the fact that there is nothing in place to keep armed assailants from our campuses today, just like 16 years ago when I met mine while I was defenseless. Whether I had my weapon, I had more to lose than he did that night. If I'd had my weapon, I would have faced expulsion from school, losing my permit, and possibly jail time. My attacker was not a student, nor did he have a CCW permit. Furthermore, during his sentencing, he received a 1-year enhanced charge for having a gun. I lost my dignity that night, and my life changed forever. Today, students across UNLV campus will forever be changed. Nevada didn't allow them to defend themselves against their attack with equal force. You see, more and more people are seeing through this propaganda media liberal narrative of taking matters into their own hands. They want to take matters into their own hands here because this narrative of guns, any kind of gun is going to increase violence it's just the opposite of reality. The Daily Wire reports this. Hundreds of bodega workers in New York City are applying for concealed carry gun permits as the city struggles with ongoing violent theft. The United Bodega of America, the union representing bodega workers, announced Sunday that it has helped at least 230 bodega owners apply for firearm licenses. Bodegas, they're like small convenience stores, are often located in high crime neighborhoods, making them just a frequent target for criminals. And in some cases, of course, armed ones. After the pandemic, the bodega union said it formed a secret society of gun owners for bodega employees in New York City to obtain concealed carry licenses. The list of which store owners are armed will, of course, remain secret. This is what the union said. Anyone, and this is their quote, anyone that's out there looking to rob us, hurt us, kill us, beware, said the union spokesman Fernando Mateo. He said, quote, you may be walking into the wrong bodega because now we have the same firepower you have, unquote. The union connects store owners with concealed carry classes required by the state to obtain a permit. Instructors like Johnny Nunez, a retired NYPD sergeant and former New York City Police Academy instructor, teaches the courses. The gun ownership movement comes in the wake of several high-profile deadly crimes in bodegas over the last few years. Back in 2018, a 15-year-old boy entered a Bronx bodega before he was dragged out and stabbed to death by gang members. In March, a double shooting at a Bronx bodega left one man dead. Just weeks before that, a deli worker on the Upper East Side was shot and killed by an armed robber with a criminal record. In October, a man shot another man in the stomach and chased him into a bodega before police arrived, and the victim ultimately died. Bodegas are not the only retail stores packing heat in New York. About a quarter of the National Supermarket Association members in the city are now carrying guns as well, compared to only 10% before the pandemic, is what the group said. Robberies, assaults, burglaries, and grand larceny are up in double-digit percentages from 2 years ago in New York City, although they are down this year from last year, according to NYPD data. I wonder why that is. Shootings are down significantly after spiking in 2020, after which the Bodega Union began to push the gun licenses. The Bodega Union's president, Red James Rodriguez, 60 years of age, owns several bodegas in the Bronx and said that he obtained his concealed carry license 2 months ago and bought a 9mm Smith & Wesson pistol. Right. But, at some point, and this comes out from crimeresearch.org, at some point, you think that the empirical evidence would be overwhelming. When Aurora, Colorado Batman movie theater shooter attacked, there were 7 movie theaters showing The Dark Knight Rises on July 20th within 20 minutes of the killer's apartment. But the killer picked the only theater that had signs posted that it was a gun-free zone. His first target had been an airport, but he worried about their substantial security there. Similar stories have occurred at malls such as in Omaha and Salt Lake City or Lafayette, Louisiana movie theater. Despite teachers carrying guns in schools in 20 states, all the shooting attacks at schools have occurred in schools that ban teachers from having guns. Given that people are allowed to carry their permitted concealed handguns in vast majority of public places, if these mass public shootings were random, let's say, 95% or higher of these attacks would take place in areas where permitted concealed handguns were allowed, right? I mean, that's just simple math. But instead, the reverse is true, with 96% of those attacks taking place where general citizens are banned from having guns. At some point, it would seem obvious that these attacks aren't random. Vince Vaughn explained what should be obvious to most people in an interview with the UK edition of GQ. And he said this, it says, quote, "It's well known that the greatest defense against an intruder is the sound of a gun hammer being pulled back. All these gun shootings that have gone down in America since 1950, only 1 or 2 have happened in non-gun-free zones. Take mass shootings. They've only happened in places that don't allow guns. These people are sick in the head and are going to kill innocent people. They are going to slaughter defenseless human beings. They do not want confrontation. In all of our schools, it is illegal to have guns on campuses. So again and again, these guys go and shoot up these effing schools because they know there are no guns there. They are monsters killing 6-year-olds," unquote. So let's look at what he has to say here. Let's look at just a few examples. On the planned church attack in Detroit, the person planned the attack noted one reason for picking his target. And this is what it was. Quote, "It's easy. And a lot of people go there. Plus, people are not allowed to carry guns in church. Plus, it would make the news," unquote. The Covenant School shooting in Nashville just this year, back in March 27th. Quote, "It was the only school that was targeted. There was another location that was mentioned, but because of the threat assessment by the suspect of too much security, they decided not to. That area was here in Nashville, so we're continuing with the investigation as well." That came from the police themselves there. The shooter who killed 6 people in Santa Barbara, California, explained his own choice in his 141-page manifesto. He turned down targets because he worried that someone with a gun would cut short his killing spree. That same month, a killer shot to death 3 people in Canada. His Facebook page made fun of gun-free zones with pictures of defenseless victims explaining to killers that they weren't allowed to have their guns. Like we talked about earlier, we finally got a look at the diary of the Batman movie theater killer, and it was clear that he was considering both attacking an airport and the movie theater, but he turned down the airport option because he was concerned about their substantial security. Beyond that, only one of the 7 movie theaters near the killer's apartment had posted signs banning the permitted concealed handguns, and that theater was the one he picked to attack. The Buffalo mass murderer just last year wrote in his manifesto explaining why he picked the target that he did. Quote, areas where CCW are outlawed or prohibited may be good areas to attack. And he also wrote, areas with strict gun laws are also great places of attack. You see, like other attackers, the Buffalo murderer cased the target before his attack. He knew what was going to be a gun-free zone and what wasn't. Mass public shootings keep occurring in gun-free zones. 94% of attacks since 1950. In fact, if you take the years between 1998 and 2015, 96.2% of mass public shootings are in gun-free zones. That's leaving only 3.8% of those shootings where guns were allowed. Dr. John Lott has an op-ed piece at the Washington Times, and he put it out on October 17th. He said this. He says, Hamas attacked as Israelis were wrapped up in a 7-day-long Jewish festival of Sukkot on October 7th. As many as 1,200 Israelis and some Americans were murdered, thousands wounded, and hundreds more taken hostage. Hamas terrorists went into civilian areas and attacked defenseless people who were walking down the street and shopping in stores. A September 20 Jerusalem Post headline prophetically warned, quote, Israelis should carry guns on Yom Kippur, police say, unquote. But as of 2022, only 148,000 Israelis carried gun permits in public for protection, just 3% of the adult Jewish population. 20 years earlier, more than 10% of the adult Jewish population had permits. Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid called the recent police statement, quote, dangerous. He echoed statements common among Democrats, of course, in the United States, calling the citizens of Israel to come with weapons to the synagogue on Yom Kippur is not a security policy. It is dangerous populism. That's what he said. Yeah. Concealed carry is now much more widespread in the United States than in Israel. In 2022, 8.5% of American adults had permits. And outside of the restricted states of California and New York, if you just take those 2 states out, about 10.2% of adults had permits. And these numbers don't even account for the fact that there are now 27, over half, constitutional carry states where it isn't necessary to have a permit to carry. California, with one of the lowest concealed handgun permit rates and the strictest gun control laws in the country, shouldn't hold itself out as a model for the rest of the country to follow. The periods after 2000, 2010, 2020, 2022, the year 2020 show a consistent pattern. California's per capita rate of mass public shootings is always much greater than the rest of the country. On Sunday, the day after the attack, Israel radically changed its policy on who could carry guns publicly. Quote, today I direct the Firearms Licensing Division to go on an emergency operation in order to allow as many citizens as possible to arm themselves. The plan will take effect within 24 hours. This is what the Israeli Minister of National Security said on a post on X. In response to the terrorist attacks for decades, Israel put more police and military to protect people. But they found that no matter how much money they spent, they couldn't cover all the possible targets. Before Israel began letting civilians carry handguns in 1970s, terrorists committed attacks in Israel almost entirely with machine guns. Afterwards, though, terrorists usually used bombs. The reason was simple. Armed citizens can quickly immobilize a gun-wielding attacker, but no one can respond to a bomb once the bomb is exploded, right? Still, armed citizens have occasionally even succeeded in preventing the bombings. Like their Israeli counterparts, American police recognize their own limits. A deputy in uniform has an extreme difficult job in stopping these attacks, as noted by Saratoga County, Florida Sheriff Kurt Hoffman, when he said, these terrorists have huge strategic advantages in determining the time and the place of attacks. They can wait for a deputy to leave the area or pick an undefended location. Even when police or deputies are in the right place at the right time, those in uniform who can readily identify as guards may well be holding up neon signs saying, "Shoot me first." My deputies know that we cannot be everywhere. In fact, Police One, the largest private organization for police officers with 749,000 officers, surveyed its members and found that 86% of them believed that casualties from public mass shootings could be reduced or avoided altogether if citizens had carried permitted concealed handguns in public places. An incredible 94% of mass public shootings occur in places where civilians are banned from having guns. 77% of Police One members supported the armed teachers and or school administrators who volunteer to carry at their school. No other policy to protect children and school staff received such widespread support. And when a life-threatening crisis strikes, there might not be time for a police to arrive. Amid such a sudden and massive assault by Hamas, it was simply impossible for Israeli police and military to protect all citizens. Unfortunately, some lessons are learned the hard way. If only more Israelis had been armed at the time of the attack, more of them would be alive today. So, more than 20 years ago, Kleck, who taught at Florida State University, he reported a figure of 2.5 million good guys with a gun using it in self-defense. In 1993, Kleck and his colleague Mark Gertz surveyed 5,000 adults and asked if they or their household members had used a gun in self-defense in the past 5 years, even if it wasn't fired. Just over 1% of the respondents said they did. In their National Self-Defense Survey, published in 1995, Kleck and Gertz extrapolated that figure to the entire adult population of course, at that time, 200 million, concluding that Americans using guns for self-defense, they do that as often as 2.1 to 2.5 million times a year. Research, of course, since then has showed figures ranging from the FBI's own figure of 1 million to 4 million every year. So, remind me again why we have gun-free zones. You see, these seem to be the most dangerous places to be. And when we make even our schools gun-free zones, we're putting our children and their lives in danger. There is no reason to have gun-free zones, in my opinion. Now, that may be completely different for you, and I would definitely love to hear your take on that. You may even know of scenarios. You may even have stories where a a violent crime or something has been thwarted because of a good guy with a gun. I would love to hear from you on that. And of course, you can always do that. This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications. This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.